Welcome to the Sports Playbook, where we discuss solutions to issues that impact sports. I'm your host, Angela Hayslett. Today's guest is Wade Stettner, a meteorologist for Data Transmission Network, also known as DTN. Today, we're going to discuss extreme weather on the course. Golf and storms don't mix. Let's get to it. Welcome, Wade. Thank you for joining us today on the Sports Playbook.
Thank you, Angela.
Really glad to have you here. You have a really interesting job where you study, observe, and forecast the weather as a meteorologist, and you have an even more unique role in that you go to sporting events, you travel, and you help sporting events identify weather threats and report weather conditions to those who are actually managing and operating different events. So how did you get into this line of work?
So I got my meteorology degree and started working at DTN. And after a few years, I started on the aviation side, doing aviation forecasting. And then this PGA Tour opportunity came about and back in 2005. And I started back in 2005, kind of working with the PGA Tour and have done it since. And since then, we've expanded to other, the LPGA, PGA of America, other golf networks, and other sports throughout the years.
And you've been doing a lot with the PGA Tour and other golf tournaments. So you also supervise a group of other meteorologists who also travel to similar events. So tell us, what is a typical week like for you when you're traveling to a golf tournament? What does that week entail?
Sure. So there are 7 of us that kind of do this on a semi-full-time basis, where we're traveling kind of around the country, around the world, really. And the majority of my on-site travels are for the PGA Tour, for the LPGA. It's mostly in the golf industry, the different golf organizations there. But a typical week on the PGA Tour, I will fly to the event on Monday, get my equipment set up, give briefings, and then work starts Tuesday morning, really, with practice rounds. And they have the pro-ams, and then they have the tournament rounds. Takes us all the way till the end when they crown a champion on Sunday. We pack everything up, go to the airport Monday morning, go to the next event, and rinse and repeat, basically.
That must be really long days. What time do you start in the morning, and what time do you get to go home and rest?
They are long days. We're there typically before the sun comes up, and this time of year we go right up till sunset. In the summertime, those days can get long. Those days can go till 7, 8 p.m. And if we have weather delays during the daytime, that pushes that all the way back to sunset, which in some parts of the country can be as late as 9 at times. So they're long days, and you just kind of you go with it.
Particularly in the middle of the summer when the seasons, the days are longer. I'm sure that can be especially long.
Yeah, the summertime, it always coincides with long days plus thunderstorms. And when you get those, it just makes for long work days. But it goes with the job, though.
The perfect storm, no pun intended.
Yes.
So tell me about the necessity of having a meteorologist on site for golf tournaments. Why are you there? There's so many weather apps and services that people can subscribe to, and many choose to go that route. But why are you on site? What is so unique about these types of events that requires a meteorologist's presence?
So the PGA Tour actually started having a meteorologist on site back in the early 90s. They had 2 years, had some fatalities due to lightning strikes that happened at professional golf tournaments. And that's the point where the PGA Tour is like, look, we need a meteorologist on site to really kind of help us manage this so we're not caught off guard. And that's really where it started. And it has since evolved. That was kind of pre-internet days, if you think about it, where the meteorologists at the time would have to phone in and talk to the National Weather Service office and would get like kind of printouts of what the radar is. Technology has really helped make this easier for everybody with radars, and now with a lot of things going on mobile, we can just have a lot more information to work with to help the organizations make smart decisions when it comes to weather.
So no more phoning it in. You have your phone with you and you can make decisions. Tell me more about the equipment that you bring and that you need to perform your duties and responsibilities.
Sure. Most of what I can use is on the internet. A lot of it is subscription-based stuff. A lot of it comes from DTN, from our internal company websites. But then also we bring a piece of equipment called an electric field meter, which measures sort of the charge in the atmosphere in and around the venue itself. So from our detection network, which I can get on the internet, that shows where all the lightning strikes occur. So we can watch storms that have lightning as they're approaching us. We know which ones are electrified, which ones are not. But that extra piece of equipment helps us for storms that are developing directly overhead or very much nearby. So we can actually capture that first lightning strike before it happens, or at least alert people to the possibility of that first lightning strike before it happens, because you don't want to wait until the lightning occurs before you make a decision.
How close can the lightning be in proximity to that device before you're made aware of electricity in the air?
That has a range of about 15 miles where I can start to see. I look for certain signatures within the data that comes out that shows when lightning starts occurring. And then you can also see as a cloud gains electricity, that measurement, it detects that measurement, and I can see that on my screen in real time. So as the cloud becomes electrified, I'm watching that in real time, and I can relay that information to the organization or to the tournament to say, hey, this cloud gained charge. We need to start thinking about a possible situation. Once it reaches a certain threshold where I become uncomfortable, that's when we would likely suspend play.
And how does that equipment different than what a golf course may have something installed otherwise, where they have a lightning detection system with an alarm attached, or other sporting venues have something similar? So how does your equipment, is it the same? Is it different? What's the functionality that you bring to the table with that equipment?
So there are a lot of different manufacturers that make that type of equipment. The main difference is I'm looking at the raw data, whereas a lot of these other ones that golf courses might use have an algorithm built in. So those, you tend to get more false alarms, and also more, lightning strike might happen before the alarm goes up. So they do a good job, but they don't do a great job. Having just actually looking at the raw data and seeing everything in real time, also taking into account the radar, the proximity of the radar, the cloud tops that I see. I'm looking at all these different aspects as storms are building near the venue itself.
DTN provides on-site support, and they also provide remote support. Can you talk about the difference between those two services?
Yeah, so there are different levels of support that can take. There's the basic one is having a subscription where you can look at the lightning data on your phone, on a laptop, and you can make your own decision. You can do the next step up where you say, I want access to a meteorologist. So if you see something coming, if you see dark sky, you can get on the phone, you can talk to a meteorologist. They can kind of walk you through what they're seeing on the screen with some meteorological background. And then the ultimate really is to have a meteorologist on site where you can go into the meteorologist's office and he can explain to you what's happening and decisions in real time, in person.
And you're providing support for a week-long golf tournament. It's my understanding that you also provide your company also provides some support for Notre Dame football. And most of your events are more like weekend festivals or something that's longer than one day in duration. So why do one-day events typically go for remote services rather than an in-person on-site meteorologist?
For those, it's probably more of a budgetary issue for some of these organizations that have single day events. Because remember, you're taking a meteorologist, you're flying them to the event, putting them up in a hotel. It's an expensive, and the big organizations, they can afford that luxury. But if you can't afford that, there's the remote option, which works just as well for your event if you need access to a meteorologist and need to talk to somebody. And they can also kind of watch your event, and they can alert you remotely too. So you don't have to be, as an organizer, you don't have to be in front of the computer watching the radar. If there's a meteorologist watching it for you, he will call you preactively and say, hey, there's something building, there's something coming your way. To talk about, some options that you have.
So tell us what that's like when you are working an event and there is some kind of weather pattern that may be presenting some kind of concern. What happens? What is your role? What do you do? How do you communicate what is happening to the event director?
So I'll use the PGA Tour as an example. If we come in for a day and we're playing tournament golf and no weather possible that afternoon, I start briefing them in the morning. We make sure that everybody knows that what the forecast is, what the percentages are, and really kind of the severity of any storms that are possible later that day. And as things develop, you kind of go into different codes. Like you go into a code yellow, which means, hey, let's be alert. We know this is possible within the next 2 hours. You can upgrade that to orange, which is be prepared, which means, hey, there's something already developing. It's coming this way. It's probably going to be here within an hour. We need to get everybody in position. And that can be everything from staging evacuation vans to making sure everybody has the proper equipment that they need, including air horns, and that everybody's kind of just ready for it. When lightning does get too close or we get to that point where we're going to suspend, everybody's ready and it's a smooth process. The last thing you want to do is for everybody to be caught off guard where, hey, we have to suspend. Like, oh my gosh, we had no idea this was coming and now we have to scramble in order to make this happen before the storm gets on top of us.
So how often so you have these meetings, but how much notice do you have of imminent weather situations? So how much warning are you able to provide? You provide the meeting in the morning and you give some sort of update, but can things happen rather quickly that are unexpected that you're not able to see? Like, how good is our technology and your ability to predict what's going to happen in a given day?
Technology is really good. As far as the forewarning, that's kind of on the weather itself. Like if a storm develops 100 miles away and is tracking in our direction, we have hours to kind of follow that as it's approaching. There are other times when something might pop up directly overhead. You have a shorter window, but you can see it happening, and that's why I have the equipment. And when I know the conditions are right for thunderstorms, and I start to see the clouds gain vertical sort of depth is what I would call it. They start to get tall, and then we can start to get ready, even if there's nothing on the radar at the time, or if the storms have yet to produce any lightning, we're still getting ready in the background. So when we do hit that point and we have to suspend, people are ready for it.
And the tournament director has to have a lot of trust in your abilities and the information you're giving. So Wade, whose decision is it to suspend play or to cancel a tournament? What kind of role do you play in influencing that decision?
It's usually the tournament director or the event organizer that would have the ultimate call. And oftentimes I will call them into my office if we're getting close to a possible suspension or we have inclement weather coming this way, so they can see what I'm looking at, and I can kind of explain them and walk them through what I anticipate to happen with the storm. And then that way they can make the best decision possible. And oftentimes lightning occurs within a defined area, that's kind of an automatic trigger, like, hey, we have to suspend now, lightning has gotten too close. And I'll just relay that information, like, hey, we just had a lightning strike at, say, 4 miles. It's time to suspend, lightning is getting too close, and that will sort of trigger him to, start the suspension process.
And then there's a lot of communication. So this process, there's a lot of staging that goes on with that as well. And they may have evacuation vehicles that sort of do some staging. People are sort of getting ready. Security might be moving in a new location. Tell me about a time when you were at a tournament and there was some kind of weather condition that arose where you had to suspend play or cancel play. What was that like? Were there any situations where your life was in danger, and what did you do in that situation?
We have suspensions, almost on a weekly basis, especially once we get to the summertime. So it happens very often. The most memorable ones are obviously the ones that involve severe weather, where you may have, severe thunderstorm warnings, possible tornado warnings that develop and in the vicinity of the golf course. And when that happens, kind of additional steps need to be taken. For example, structures like office which might be in a construction trailer, might become unsafe. At that point, we all pack up and head into the clubhouse or into a permanent structure that would be safer for us. And that's happened on a couple occasions. I remember once in Memphis and another time in New Orleans where just very severe weather was headed towards us. And we had to make that decision sometimes an hour ahead of time to make sure you can get everybody off the golf course. If you think about a golf course, it is a large property. And if somebody's on the far end of the golf course, it can sometimes take them 20, even 30 minutes just to walk back to the clubhouse. And at that point, they need to get into their car and exit the property. So in those situations, you have a lot of lead time when you have the real severe weather headed your way, to make sure that everybody can, get to a safe place and get off the property if needed. Absolutely.
In 2011, the Hurricane Irene kind of ended the first round of the Barclays in Plainfield, New Jersey. Officials were sort of discussing what to do with the tournament when they felt an earthquake. And I know that's sort of out of the scope of your weather monitoring conditions, but, has there ever been a situation where there was hesitation on part of the directors in canceling, suspending, calling it a day, or communicating that everyone needs to evacuate the course?
They always want to make sure they have the right decision. They don't want to do a false alarm, but I think that's what's beneficial of having a meteorologist on site is you can really, they can ask those questions and I can give them, the answers that I'm looking at, and we can watch the radar and kind of see what's headed our way. They always want to know, probabilities of severe weather and really kind of the impacts that are expected on the golf course. When you say hesitation, I wouldn't say that they're hesitant by saying, no, we don't want to do that. If I say we need to suspend, they won't say, no way, we don't want to do that. But they the severity, so they kind of know what steps that they do for the suspension process.
So you can help advise them in that process. Very good. And then you had a really interesting experience working at the golf event in the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. What can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, we had a lot of weather down there in Rio, and I was supporting the golf venue for the 2016 Rio Olympics. And week was the men's competition. Week 2 was the women's competition. And we got through week 1, we had a lot of weather. And then when we got to week 2, the Rio radar was out of service for the entire week. So essentially I was kind of without any radar data. And at that point, you still have the forecast data where you can still make a forecast. You still know which days have thunderstorm potential, which ones don't. But when stuff starts developing or moving close to you and you don't have that radar, you kind of go old school and you go outside and you start looking for certain, signatures that you see in the clouds to help them. And then you also have the lightning data. So you're not completely blind from that transpoint, but as far as the rainfall and stuff like that, you go outside and you kind of go old school at that point.
Well, and it's interesting because the International Golf Federation was really integral in bringing you on board as a meteorologist, right? They developed a weather action plan that was sort of independent of the local organizing committee. So what can you tell me? What the weather action plan, are you consulted as part of that process, or do they share that information with you in that plan? How does the weather action plan affect your role?
Yeah, so that's number one for any large event occurring. There's a sporting event, a concert festival, or whatever, is that they have a plan. So when the meteorologist shows up, I can see their plan, and I can kind of see what actions need to be taken, and that really helps in the planning process as far as communications goes. To different organizations may have different thresholds for when they would suspend play, or when they would shut down a venue, and for me to be able to see that, I can then help them make the decisions, to help them make better decisions as far as any suspension, any inclement weather process that occurs.
Are you part of the recommendation do you influence the development of that weather action plan? Do you look at it and say, this is a little unusual? What I've seen in other locations is maybe a little different. Do you have any say in that, or are you sort of helping impart the plan as part of your role?
If they ask for my input, I will give my input based on kind of what I've seen from either their weather action plan and compare it to ones that I've seen in other organizations. But in general, most of them have a well thought out plan. And when I see that, they've already gone through the training, they've gone through what I call kind of the decision tree, where somebody makes the decision and then they relay that information to their department heads below them, and it kind of filters down so everybody on the ground kind of gets the same messaging. In general, most places do have a really solid weather action plan ahead of time.
What are some of the key features of a weather action plan? What does that look like?
Mostly kind of the communication piece. So you have somebody at the top who makes the ultimate decision, and then that goes down to 2 or 3 people below them, which might be different departments, and then that message kind of spreads to everybody. So the main part of that is just so everybody gets the same message, and it comes from the top down. Because there can be, I've had events where there's misinformation that spreads on radios. We oftentimes talk on like walkie-talkie radios, and you hear somebody who says something. They might have talked to their wife who's 5 miles away, and all of a sudden this information that's not totally accurate gets on the radio, and it kind of creates a panic, and that's where I can kind of step in to say, no, that's incorrect. We don't have anything occurring right now. We're safe to play, but I've seen that, and we definitely try to get ahead of that so that misinformation doesn't kind of spread and create panic at the venue itself.
That's interesting that perhaps there's other parties that are kind of almost working against you in that situation, and that they may be communicating maybe observations, but they don't have the training or the equipment to monitor that. Is that a common challenge that you encounter?
I wouldn't say they're working against me. What I would say is that they're not trained for it. So they've heard through word of mouth. Oh, I just talked to somebody who said that, there's this terrible storm, 5 miles away, or there's, thunder. A lot of people say, oh, I heard thunder, and they'll put that on the radio. And I can say, whatever you heard was not thunder. I can assure you there's no thunder in the region. So I wouldn't say they're working against me. They're trying to help, but sometimes misinformation, you got to put it out really quick before people get panicked.
Before they spread that information and people respond accordingly. So yeah. Tell me about some of the locations where you've had extreme weather. I think you mentioned Memphis as a place you've had weather before, New Orleans. What are some of the locations where geographically, or maybe even events based on the time of year, that you just know that there may be some specific weather events?
I mean, usually when we're in the springtime in the South, which is kind of, peak tornado season, events in Texas in April and May. And, that's where the New Orleans one is in the spring as well. Memphis is in the summer. So those are the events that you have potential for really severe weather if you get caught in that pattern. But every part of the country has its own unique weather challenges. I just finished a tournament in Los Angeles, which most people think, oh, it's Los Angeles, it's always sunny in Southern California. But no, because we can have some, extreme winds. Winds are always a real tricky forecast in California, where we have terrain in the area. And you may have other events that aren't severe. It could be fog, those fog banks that form along the ocean that could come on. Can shut a golf tournament down. And this picture here shows in San Diego where we had a golf or a fog suspension where the marine layer came and it came onto the golf course. And you think, well, why can't you play in fog? Well, if you can't see the flag from where you're hitting, we don't play golf in the dark as well.
So tell me, what weather events are you able to monitor and inform? The fog situation, does that fall in your domain, or is that sort of outside of your domain?
Oh, that absolutely falls in my domain, as does wind, even frost. We have frost delays at times, and just that information can help the maintenance crew plan ahead. And it helps the tournament director too, because he doesn't want to come in thinking he's, got a clean, nice day when all of a sudden we're delaying 2 hours in the morning waiting for frost to burn off the golf course. And that's just another indication or another scenario where I just provide data for them and information so they can make smart choices.
And they might be able to make different decisions, like trying to mitigate some of the frost or delaying the tournament sooner rather than waiting until people get there, things like that. So fog is one of the issues that you monitor for, lightning storms, of course. Tell me what other kind of weather conditions you are looking for.
High wind is a real important one. Another one could just be rainfall. Oftentimes golf, they'll play in the rain, but if the rain becomes too heavy where it starts to pond on the greens and they can't putt the ball, then they can't play within the rules of golf, and then they would have to shut down as well. That's not necessarily my decision to shut down. That would be the officials that are out on the golf course that are kind of monitoring what happens. And if players are like, hey, look, I got this big water puddle between my ball and where the hole is. I can't putt this. And they will then, suspend play. And then they'll ask me, they're like, wait, how long is this downpour going to last? If it's a 5-minute downpour, everybody will just kind of take a 5-10 minute break and stay there. If it's a longer duration, then they might send everybody back into the clubhouse, wait for the golf course to drain, and then kind of up again, an hour or two later once the rain has passed.
Yeah, sounds like good information that they'd want to know, that those distinctions for sure. And I know you end up staying a lot of times the PGA Tour or other golf tournaments, they sort of preserve an extra day if for some reason they have to delay the tournament and extend to Monday. Has any tournaments that you've been part of or that you're aware of ever had to go beyond one extra day of play, or have they all been able to conclude in a timely fashion?
I've had a Tuesday finish before. I have. That was a few years ago. And in fact, just a few weeks ago, the Pebble Beach tournament, they had a finish because they were battling, high winds and rain, and they even had hail on the golf course on that last day. And just those delays had kind of piled up to the point where they couldn't finish by sunset on Sunday. And then they come back and play a full day on Monday as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what else do you think our viewers should know about the services that you provide, what your company does, and the impact for sporting events?
So we have our new division is weather risk is what it's called, and my title is actually a senior weather risk analyst that go out, and for big events, having an on-site meteorologist I think is key, and that's your PGA Tour, your LPGA, some of your big concert festivals, Notre Dame football. They feel it's very necessary to have that really high level support for their events. But other ones, if you can call in, if you can talk to a meteorologist, they can watch the weather for you. They can preemptively call, be sitting at behind a radar screen, during those events. And then even just having a plan. I think number one, even if you go down to the high school level or even like little league level, where you don't have that infrastructure, have a plan. As long as somebody is there to monitor the radar on their phone and to make that decision, a plan is always the key.
What's the future? As technology evolves, what's the future for the services that you can provide? Do you have any insight or of what we can expect to see as far as the evolution of being able to predict and shape the way we view weather and sports?
Well, I'll say that since I started this role on the PGA Tour back in 2005 up till present, the forecasts have gotten so much better. I can do now what I could never do, 15, 16 years ago. And I think back when I was in college, how forecasting was not good. It was not good. We tried really hard, but it was really tough. So just the technology itself has gotten so much better. So just being able to have it on your phone. I mean, everybody has weather apps and you can kind of stay ahead of it, and have a professional weather app with professional lightning data is really, really key. And going into the future, it's going to get better and better. Now that kind of that AI technology is being kind of built into these forecast engines to monitor forecasts going out, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days. It just gets better and better every year.
That's amazing. I'm glad to hear that. The safer we can be, the better off we all are, and the better experiences we can all have. Wade, thank you so much for your time and your insight, and appreciate what you do.
Great. Thank you for having me on, Angela.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us today on the Sports Playbook. That was the extreme weather on the course. Golf and storms don't mix. In our next episode, we will have Christian Sane, who will discuss the importance of golf course maintenance. We'll see you then.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.